Welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I need your advice and maybe your experience. I just recently went through training for my AP English classes, and one of the topics that kept coming up was about assignments that mostly we had always requested our students to do in their own time at home. But the main worry of the participants now, after the introduction of very smart AIs and writing apps, the main concern has been that students will be tempted to use these AI resources. And some of these AI resources or these apps are so smart they can actually generate an essay if you give a prompt to them. And a lot of discussion went into how to forestall that, or how to ensure our in-class work in a way that students don't even have the temptation of using these resources to produce work that is not their own. Now, personally, I always have tried to trust my students, and I believe that they themselves believe in the integrity of their own education. But considering the kind of world in which we live and in which for young people who are stressed or, have 1,000 other things to do, such temptations are so easily available. My personal thought on this was to reduce work that students have to take home and do at home, and rather focus more on in-class work. Now, this may not apply to college because, at college level you have to assign a long research paper, but there are ways of forestalling any form of plagiarism or cheating there as well. But let's say if you teach at a high school, which I will be teaching in the fall, my hope is to do as much work as possible in class. So, for example, I was planning to assign at least 15 journals over an year, and the students were supposed to write them in their own time, but now I am planning to do them in class instead. So, for example, every Monday when the students come in and they have read the works that were assigned to them over the weekend, we'll use 20-30 minutes of our first class period of the week for them to write a response journal to the reading. Now, since this is an AP class, this will serve many purposes. One, it will give them the experience of writing a coherent mini essay, handwriting, while being timed, and that's the kind of test they will take anyway, so there is that kind of training. But it will also increasingly train them as to how to organize their thoughts, how to develop a thesis, how to give examples from the text, how to provide summary, and then how to conclude within a given time frame. So I think that would be useful to them, and it would obviate the necessity to check for whether or not someone has plagiarized, or it will take away the temptation of cheating through AI and other resources while they are home. Now, for longer works, let's say when we give them a 10-page essay to be finished over 3 or 4 weeks, what helps the most is when you do not just collect the final essay, right? When you do the invention exercises in the classroom, and when the students have to go over their drafts with you and in class workshops, then you already know chunk by chunk as they are developing their paper. But also, more importantly, they can't just download a paper or get an AI to write a paper at the end of the process and get full points, because they still have to get points for the drafting phase, for the rough draft, the revised draft, and incorporating your suggestions, and then the final draft. So these are some of the thoughts that I have, based in my experience of teaching at college, but also based in this course and a slight awareness of where things are in terms of, artificial intelligence, the apps, and the temptation for students to take shortcuts. I think another important thing also would be to constantly train them ethically and morally as to why it is wrong, right? Why stealing someone else's work is wrong, why offering someone else's work as your own is wrong. And that goes into the long-term ethical training of the students. So these were some of the things that we discussed in our class, in our training. Another thing was to do group work, in-class group work, where you assign each group a certain theme or a certain part of the text, and they discuss it amongst themselves. And then by the end of the class, they collectively write a sort of a report or an essay, but it's done in class and it's manual writing and not typing on a computer. And that also would encourage them to produce their own original works and responses to your prompts. Now, I think what also goes without saying is that in this entire process, we also have to train our students to think differently, to not go for perfection, because perfection is what that leads us to sometimes taking shortcuts, but rather telling them that it's the effort they put into a work and the sincerity with which they accomplish it and approach it individually and as a part of a group that really is important, and that's what we are training them for. And maybe that would help them see things differently, not in terms of what is the end result, but rather, learning and enjoying the process itself. So these are some of the thoughts that I have, some of the things that I gathered in my training about AP English. But as I said in the beginning, I'm really interested in your ideas. What is it that you do? What techniques do you use, especially if you're educators at the high school level, but even at college level? What do you do to forestall any temptation on part of the students to use these apps and programs to write essays or compose essays and not necessarily do the work themselves? So I'll be happy to hear your views about it. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Take care of each other. And as always, from me to you, peace and love.